welcome to another episode of School Talk Café.
Yep.
What?
I can't talk again.
Sure, let me finish.
Okay, finish.
All right, we've had a beautiful season so far, and today we have a wonderful. I'm not going to introduce her yet, but let me introduce myself. And the other person who was very eager to be introduced. Should I just wait for me? All right,
I wasn't eager to be introduced. I just let out a small sigh.
Excitement.
I was excited. Yes. I mean, it's a new year. Okay, you know that.
That's true.
Oh, so I'm excited.
All right, my name is Adria. It's good to have you back here on this episode, and I have with me
Sele.
That's all.
That's all.
All right. Okay. So in this episode, we're going to be having this beautiful conversation with somebody I love what she does. I admire her strength and her tenacity in her space. I have none other than Mrs. Edem Dorothy Ossai. I'm not going to read her entire profile, because if I did, please don't. If I did, it's going to be an entire episode. All right. So she's a Nigerian-based lawyer. Many of you don't know that. She's also an education, gender, and youth policy specialist. She has about 15 years of experience in advancing child rights, universal basic education, and gender-responsive policy across Africa. She has degrees from the University of Ibadan, OAU, and of course the University of Chicago. She's a committed civic educator. She's the founder of Mayan. Those of us who are in Ibadan, we know Mayan. We're currently seated in the Mayan Smart Library here in the city of Ibadan, which was established in 2012. All right, that's what I'm going to say about her profile. By the time we go deep into this conversation, you will understand.
There'll be an unraveling and an unveiling.
The depth of her person and what she does. So welcome. I know you're a very busy person. Thank you for giving us this time.
Thank you for having me. Never too busy for important conversation. I'm excited to be on School Talk Café.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to throw it back to you quickly so that you can just start off with the conversations.
Okay. Welcome to School Talk Café and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. As a lawyer, policy expert, education advocate, I want to ask, what first stirred your passion for education and child rights?
So for that, I have to go back to my own childhood.
Okay.
So I grew up in the University of Ibadan on campus, and I think I was 14. My parents, obviously, being academics, my mother was in the television industry. She was a producer. So I was a child who was raised on the news, network news, similar to many families. But the difference in my home was that my mother was particularly in children's TV production. So she always needed, young people who could speak. I happened to be one of those children who used to talk a lot. So she found material easily at home. Now what happens is when you're listening to the news and you have to, be on TV generating content, you're more sensitive to what's happening around you. So I think by 14, apart from one particular news broadcast, I remember when and it was Buki Ajayi of blessed memory, Tokumbo Ajayi of blessed memory, who first announced, and I will never forget that, Nigeria was dealing with an out-of-school children phenomenon, that the number of out-of-school children had risen. I don't remember to what degree she announced at the time, but that it was causing a lot of concern and alarm, blah, blah, blah. So I started asking myself, which one is, so some people are not going to school. So yes, people are not going to school. So, I think my radar then became tuned into that. And then I had these two neighbors, very small girls. So in UI, you had the typical, academic who lived in one of the, quarters, and then you would have a boys' quarters that was reserved often for non-teaching staff, the low skill, maybe security guards, support staff in the university. So we had a particular non-teaching, setting. My neighbors, the professor at home, there was a girl who was about 6, 7, and then the people residing in the boys' quarters also had a little girl with them who was same age. So they used to play together. Every evening you hear them, blah, 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 blah. But in the mornings, there was very unique situation. One would be going off to school. We all went to the university staff school, which was close to where I grew up. And then the other girl that was her, companion in the evenings, you will see her with a tray on her head, with her auntie. The auntie would have a baby strapped to her back, and that one was going, they used to sell bolly. So they sell it by the corner of the road. So I just noticed this contrast. And that's when the news that I had listened to several, weeks or whatever, just gained new meaning, because right in front of me, I saw
there was a connect.
Yes. So this is actually that thing this woman is announcing. One child, their companions, their lives are merged in the evening, but in the mornings, they take a very separate trajectory. One goes off with her bright white socks. It's off to school. The other one, so I started haranguing my mother. I would always be harassing her with questions after questions after questions. I then became very interested in the idea that some children were born that could go to school and open up a world of possibilities for them. And some were born and that chapter just never opened up, and that had limitations for their future. So onwards to studying law in the university. By then I also became a delegate for UNICEF through my mother's, facilitating my entry into television. UNICEF discovered me, so I became a very strong advocate for the passage of the child rights bill at the time into law. So all of those things, I had a platform where I could, express voice. So I had voice, I had agency, and then I had an issue that I took very keen interest in and developed my passions around. And so when I became a professional, I think it was a natural progression to weave in children's rights and issues generally into my practice of law. So
and that's how the fire was lit or kindled.
Yes.
Okay, so looking back, I guess that defining moment for you was where you noticed, your very neighbors now leaving what was being reported.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask, when did it really dawn on you, that this thing was not just about schooling, but about power and opportunity?
Obviously much later in life. Because even I, when you're going through schooling, you don't fully recognize what the benefits, you're just in a system.
Yeah.
So it had to be a moment where even you saw the power of education in your life, that you could connect it to those who missed the opportunity. I recognized that, one, law gave me certain privileges quite early. Because of the nature of the training, you're in advocacy, you're expected to represent, you're allowed into rooms. Again, because I was introduced into the media early and I could build media literacy, again, I recognized that certain places I was going to, some of my mates were not going there. Certain opportunities I was getting. I'll take, for instance, this advocacy for the passage of the child rights bill. So at the time, I was one out of 10 delegates in Africa invited to speak to African heads of states. I was only 17. And we were looking at, many of these countries in comparison. What was the fate of children in these countries? So it was a biennial conference of African heads of states facilitated by, the broadcasting. It was Africast. You probably know of it. And so I was one of 10 brought in to speak to African heads of states and heads of governments. I looked around, we're 10. Of course, the population of children in Nigeria was more than 10. So I was able to critically clue into that certain things gave me access here. One, I was I was already an undergraduate of law in university. And so, but more importantly, certain, privileges of media training, access to platforms that made me, they could see, it made me visible. So I recognized that if I didn't have a good education, if I didn't come from my academic background, I wouldn't be in this space. So I started connecting. So that's one of the first insights I had, that a good education gives you access to a certain room, and that in itself is a form of power, because not everyone can get there. And when you're able to speak and make a convincing case, which is the idea of law, represent or make an argument, make a persuasive argument, and get somebody to change a decision or an action, that's power. So those were certain moments when I recognized. So apart from just recognizing the value in my own life, Then I also just generally looking at these young girls I talked about. One is going to go on and have access to higher education. She's going to be able to go write common entrance, go to secondary. For the secondary, she's going to be able to write qualifying, go to the university. Another one, because foundationally something is missing, will never have those options.
Yeah.
So just
So she's limited already from the get-go.
I was just limiting it to her schooling options. But then, as you grow older, you recognize what education privileges it gives you: income, access to job opportunities, income earning opportunities, travel opportunities, what not. You recognize that education is not only connected to higher education; it's connected to life.
Exactly.
It shapes your decision making. She will always make wrong. She'll probably even give her child a wrong dosage because she can't read. So that's just understanding the power of literacy. You understand? So she'll go to places, she'll be able to read the address. I see people who are asking, "Oh, well, I'm trying to find this address." I say, "Look at the sign now. That's the street." They can't read. So all those things, I realize, it's a life skill. Like literally, certain things are unlocked by virtue of going to school.
Yeah.
Being able to count your money. Being able to walk into a place and read the contract and know what the terms are, and not having,
the implications.
and the implications of not having that. So you're disempowered to an extent that even I didn't fathom until much later. But these were certain things that were helping me to clue in. Like, okay, this is what this thing does. And these are some of the limitations when you don't have this thing. The older I got, the more I was in the space, the more you read the literature, the more you see life around you and what, the consequences of literacy and illiteracy, how it shapes poverty and defines, livelihoods. Then it's easy. No, you don't need to go to a textbook to see, what those who are educated in the society get versus those who are not get.
Okay. That was quite a handful, but
Like you were just like that.
but it helps you, even if you knew before, it helps you say, wow, yeah, that's actually true, Yeah.
Sure.
So, well, the last question I'll be asking you for now, before I push to Adele. Now, you've studied across Nigeria, Africa, and even in the US. What, if I will ask now, how did those experiences, shape how you see African education systems today? African vis-a-vis Nigeria.
Vis-a-vis, yes, for my so going back to my classroom education. So all the way from primary school, I feel like I was more of an observer in schooling. I was just some random, I think my moment of real awakening was when I was taking the course called jurisprudence in my final year in university. Up until then, even law was abstract. It was just something you're just reading it.
Let's do it.
I was connecting it to. So I step out of the classroom. I don't connect it to life. I don't connect it to life, and this is where clinics help. Even law clinics. I think University of Inequality runs law clinics. So you have all this knowledge and information, but you can't apply it because there's a disconnect. So I was one of those, people. I was just going through the motions, right? But then jurisprudence woke me up. It was a course in law where you're dealing with philosophical questions, and I'll never forget. And the kind of teacher you have is also very critical.
Very critical.
They prod you. So that critical thinking that is dumb at its
the state of
So they're not asking you to,
define this.
Thank you. Then you define this, you're just reading a textbook definition. You did it, you're just memorizing. So rote memory drove me all the way up till that course. So that's my first awakening. Secondly, everything exists within a cultural context. And I found that my education in Nigeria was shaped by the larger cultural, norms around us. So I didn't have a very assertive classroom experience beyond that course. And I always credit my professor, Professor Demola Popola, for that course. He became the dean later, or he was the dean at the time of the Faculty of Law, OAU. But anyways, I'll fast forward to when I was even doing my first master's in the University of Ibadan. At that point in time, I had worked, so I was professional. I was a professional, so I was used to querying things. You don't just put people. I want to know why, because if I can deliver, I need to have a clear understanding. So I brought that same spirit into the classroom. But and I thank God for the kind of space. I was in the Institute of African Studies, So to some extent, I had, reputable professors and lecturers at the time, like
I knew you were going to mention.
He didn't even teach me. Interesting. He didn't take any.
No, but he is a very engaging.
Yes. Taking the course. In fact, he was one of the definers, the people who shaped the course. I was one of the inaugural students in the Media and Cultural Studies, course in the institute. So the point is, not very many professors or lecturers were open to that questioning, that query, but somewhere. Another professor or lecturer who taught me at the time, Dr. Adeduto, he was teaching performance, and I was very interested in some of the things. By then I was in development work. I had started my non-profit, so I wanted to see the cultural wall or the cultural veil that I would encounter in communities and things. That's what led me to take that course. I also came from a media background. I told you about my mother and childhood, so I was very interested in the power of the media in shaping, behaviors and patterns, right? So I was very interested in that course. But not many lecturers were open to that assertive exchange. Yeah. So the top classroom experience in Nigeria was still very inhibiting. To a large extent, you don't need your critical thinking sense awakened to even undergo a master's program. And I say that, with the greatest amount of respect for those who tried within the system. But when I went into the University of Chicago, it was a completely different ballgame. Your reading material is assigned before. Nobody's coming to give you notes. I found it strange that people were still giving me notes in my master's class in UI. Why are you giving me notes, right? But there were some people, no, Dr. Olayomi taught me, I remember I had to do one of his assignments that stressed me whole life. But those are the kinds of professors that you can't come lazy. That grade, that faculty, it has to be engaged, it has to be activated, and rigorously so. But U Chicago demands that of you, and then the kind of school I went to, U Chicago is reputed for producing some of the highest number of Nobel laureates, globally, right? And they take that legacy very seriously. So they provoke. It's one of the Ivy Leagues that, it's really deeply interesting.
A lot of prodding.
Yes. So your mind is what the institution is seeking. And at the time, the program I was in was trying to internationalize itself. So bringing a lot of students from different parts of the world so that it's not an America-centric kind of education that we're passing. So they wanted insights and perspectives from Africa, from Sub-Saharan Africa, from the global Southern Hemisphere. So we're expected to. So that reading material, you must, connect it to your context. Does it make sense? Could that certain things and theories were it can't work here. Inflation is life defined. So when you talk about inflation in the US, it's very different. The US bank reserves and everything can roll out measures. The citizens will feel it. In Nigeria, it defines, it's life and death. Yeah. The person may not be able to afford drugs and medications and things like that. There's no social, cushion, right? Yeah. So certain concepts are like, or when you talk about, certain things in political economy that they will say, so those things. So you must come in with a critical lens, and that means that you must have consumed the knowledge before, analyzed it, compared it, understood it, and then queried what you don't understand. So classroom is a discussion. It's a discussion. Nobody is coming to say first introduction, these are the concepts. No, if you didn't come prepared, you're not going to have a conversation, and the professor will stare at you blankly, right? And also because they're grading on a curve. So everything matters, not just your participation, not just your homework, your classroom participation matters. Everything is being graded. Everything is being graded. So you can't relax, and there's no free ride. In many school contexts here, you can just join group work.
Just ride on the back of the FE
It doesn't work like that. The system is so splintered to focus on you. Right. So anyway, I found myself in a very challenging context. And mind you, I was moving from social sciences to hardcore economics. So policy in the US is very heavily quant. So, and then Chicago, because of its legacy, they are the family. If you studied economics, you hear of the Chicago School of Thought, right? So these are the propounders of capitalist thinking, the basis of capitalist and other socialism. So these people take econometrics seriously. If you study poetry, they'll find a way to put statistics and quants into poetry. If you study, so there's no subject that's
just isolated like that.
So I found myself coming from a law background and then having done a first master's in media and cultural studies and dealing with the humanities, then faced squarely with quantitative studies, with econometrics, with data analysis, with political economy.
Crunching numbers.
Man, all the regression analysis. I said, my mind had not been built. I didn't have strong math proficiencies. But they tailor the program to suit you. So in fact, when they chose my profile, they recognized my limitations. But they put me because I had a first master, so they felt that I had undergone some rigor that could allow me undergo remedial studies to raise me up to a point where I could then meet the threshold. So these programs, even from recruiting the students, they've already projected, they've profiled how likely is this individual to fare within the system, given their background, given the work they do, things like that. So it was a huge struggle. I was a young mother at the time. My husband was in Nigeria, I was with my child. She was with me in Chicago because of the protracted period, right? And then I was in a program, like a fellowship. I was one of the inaugural Obama scholars. So there's a leadership component that's outside of the degree component. So the degree in itself is very all-consuming.